The dust settled on the trail as Quentin Caldwell slumped against the weathered fence post, 9 pairs of eyes watching him from the porch of his ramshackle ranch house. His calloused hands trembled as he read the telegram again. Margaret passed stop pneumonia, took her quick stop doctor, did all he could stop. The paper crumpled in his fist as he faced the bitter truth: his sister was gone. And the 9 children she'd left in his temporary care 3 months ago were now his responsibility alone. The year was 1878, and the Arizona Territory showed no mercy to a man with a broken spirit and more mouths to feed than dollars in his pocket. At 35, Quentin had never imagined himself a father, let alone to 9 children ranging from 2 to 17 years of age. His small cattle ranch barely sustained him, and now with winter approaching, desperation clawed at him like a wild animal. Uncle Quentin? The oldest, Eliza, approached cautiously. Is something wrong? Quentin stared at his niece, seeing Margaret's eyes looking back at him. Your mama, he began, his voice cracking. She ain't coming back. The children's cries pierced the desert evening, breaking something inside him that he feared might never mend. That night, as he tucked the little ones into their beds crowded throughout his modest home, a resolve hardened within him. He would find these children a proper mother, or he would find them new homes. He couldn't do this alone. 30 miles away in the growing town of Silverdale, Hannah Lawson stepped off the stagecoach, her blue dress dusty from the long journey west. At 25, she had left behind the comforts of Boston society and an unwanted engagement to answer an advertisement for a schoolteacher. The small town looked nothing like the promising description in the letter, but after her parents' deaths and her fiancé's betrayal, anywhere seemed better than where she'd been. Miss Lawson, a portly gentleman with a silver mustache, extended his hand. Mayor Wilson, welcome to Silverdale. Hannah smiled, adjusting her hat against the harsh afternoon sun. Thank you, Mayor. I'm eager to begin my teaching duties. The mayor cleared his throat uncomfortably. About that, Miss Lawson, there's been a development. The town council has decided to postpone opening the school until spring. Hannah's heart sank. Postpone? But I was assured in your correspondence. Financial difficulties. I'm afraid. The mine's production isn't what we hoped. He patted her arm awkwardly. We can offer you room and board at Mrs. Finch's boarding house until then, but I'm afraid there won't be any salary until you begin teaching. 6 months without income. Hannah felt the ground shift beneath her feet, but she straightened her spine. She hadn't traveled 2,000 miles to turn back now. I understand. Perhaps there are other ways I might contribute to the community in the meantime. Mayor Wilson brightened. Well, now that's the spirit. In fact, Reverend Parker was just telling me about a mail-order bride situation that's gone awry. Might be worth speaking to him about it. 3 days later, Hannah sat in Reverend Parker's modest study, staring at the letter in her hands. It was a request from a local rancher named Quentin Caldwell, seeking a bride who wouldn't mind helping raise his 9 newly orphaned nieces and nephews. The bride he sent for from back east took one look at all those children and fled on the next stage out, Reverend Parker explained. Poor man's desperate. Those children need a mother's touch, and he needs help. Hannah reread the letter, noting the straightforward, almost businesslike tone. He doesn't mention love. The Reverend smiled sadly. Mr. Caldwell is a good man, but he's practical. He's offering a roof, food, protection, and his name. In these parts, that's often the foundation marriages are built on. Love can grow later. Hannah thought of the teaching position that wouldn't materialize for months, her dwindling funds, and the children who needed someone. I'd like to meet him, she said finally. And the children. The following day, Hannah rode alongside Reverend Parker in his buggy, heading toward the Caldwell Ranch. The landscape was unlike anything she'd seen before, vast, rugged, beautiful in its harshness. As they approached the ranch, she saw a man mending a fence, his broad shoulders tense beneath his worn shirt, a battered hat shading his face. Quentin Caldwell looked up as the buggy approached, squinting against the sun. When Reverend Parker introduced Hannah, explaining her interest in his situation, Quentin's expression remained guarded. "Miss Lawson," he said, tipping his hat, "I appreciate you coming, but I should be clear. This isn't a romantic arrangement I'm proposing. I need help with these kids. They need a mother, and I need someone who can cook, clean, and teach them proper ways." Hannah met his gaze steadily. "I understand, Mr. Caldwell. I'm not harboring romantic illusions. I came west to teach, but circumstances have changed. I believe I could be of service to your family." Quentin's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're educated?" "From back east. Boston. I was to be the new schoolteacher here, but the position has been delayed." A flicker of something respect, perhaps, crossed his weathered face. "Come meet the children before you decide anything." The sight that greeted Hannah as they approached the house stole her breath. 9 children of varying ages were engaged in different tasks around the yard. A teenage girl was hanging laundry while keeping an eye on 2 toddlers playing in the dirt. A boy of about 12 was chopping wood with awkward strokes, while others carried water or chased chickens. "That's Eliza, she's 17, Quentin said, pointing to the oldest girl. "Then there's Matthew, 12, the twins Sarah and Samuel, 10, Josephine's 8, Daniel's 6, Rebecca's 5, and the little ones are Thomas, 4, and Grace, just turned 2. Before Hannah could respond, a crash came from inside the house, followed by wailing. Quentin sighed deeply. "And that would be Thomas, most likely." Hannah didn't hesitate. She lifted her skirts slightly and walked briskly toward the house, finding a small boy sobbing amid the broken pieces of what had been a pitcher. "I didn't mean it," he hiccuped, his face streaked with tears and dirt. Hannah knelt beside him, carefully moving him away from the broken pottery. "Of course you didn't, sweetheart. Accidents happen to everyone." She quickly cleaned up the mess, speaking softly to the boy, who soon stopped crying and began following her around like a shadow. One by one, the other children drifted in, curious about the visitor. Hannah found herself answering questions, tying shoelaces, admiring a drawing, and before she knew it, she was helping Eliza prepare a simple supper for the family. From the doorway, Quentin watched with guarded hope as this stranger from Boston somehow managed to create order from chaos. When she looked up and caught his eye, something passed between them, not romance, but understanding. A silent acknowledgement of need on both sides. That evening, after the children were asleep, Quentin and Hannah sat on the porch, the desert night cool around them. "They're wonderful children," Hannah said, "but they need structure, education, and care." Quentin nodded slowly. "I can't pay you much. The ranch barely breaks even. I don't need wealth, Mr. Caldwell, but I do need honesty." She turned to face him. "If I agree to this arrangement, I would be their mother in every sense. I would make decisions about their upbringing, their education. I would expect a partnership in that regard, even if our marriage is one of convenience." Quentin studied her for a long moment. "You've known these kids for all of 5 hours. Most women run screaming after 5 minutes. What makes you think you can handle this?" Hannah smiled slightly. "I've spent years teaching children from all backgrounds. I've dealt with grief. My parents died last year, and I believe in finding purpose where it's needed most." She paused. "Besides, where else would I go?" The practicality of her last statement seemed to resonate with him. "When would you want to do this?" "Soon. The children need stability immediately." She hesitated. "But Mr. Caldwell, I need to know, is there any chance you might resent having a wife you didn't choose for love?" Quentin looked out at the darkened landscape. "Miss Lawson, I buried any notions of romantic love years ago. I respect honesty, hard work, and kindness. You seem to have those qualities. That's enough for me." 2 days later, Hannah stood beside Quentin in Reverend Parker's small church, exchanging simple vows in a ceremony witnessed only by the children and a few townspeople. There were no flowers, no celebration afterward, just a quiet ride back to the ranch that was now her home. That first night, Quentin showed her to what had been his sister Margaret's room. "I'll sleep in the barn for now," he said awkwardly, "until we figure things out." Hannah nodded, grateful for his consideration. "Thank you. Good night, Mr. Caldwell." He paused at the door. "I reckon you should call me Quentin now." "Good night, Quentin. I'm Hannah." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I know who you are, Hannah Caldwell." The name sounded strange and right all at once. The following weeks were a blur of activity as Hannah established routines, organized the chaotic household, and began teaching the children during evenings after chores were done. She rose before dawn each day to prepare breakfast, often finding Quentin already at work outside. They rarely spoke beyond necessary communications about the children or the household, but she noticed he began staying for meals more often, watching her with the children with a thoughtful expression. One evening, after the children were asleep, Hannah sat at the kitchen table mending clothes by lamplight. Quentin came in from his night check of the cattle, his expression troubled. "Something wrong?" she asked, setting aside her sewing. He hesitated, then sat heavily across from her. "Had word from town today. There's sickness spreading, some kind of fever. Already hit the Johnsons' place hard." He ran a hand through his hair. "Their youngest died yesterday." Hannah's heart clenched. "The children, I know. I've been thinking we should keep them home, away from town for a while." "I agree," she said. "We have enough supplies to last, don't we?" Quentin nodded. "For a few weeks, yes." He studied her face. "You're good with them, you know. Better than I expected." The compliment warmed her. "They make it easy. They're good children. They weren't before you came." He gave a short laugh. "This place was pure chaos." Hannah smiled. "Children need structure and attention. And love." Something shifted in Quentin's expression. "Is that what you're giving them? Love?" "How could I not?" she answered honestly. "They're remarkable, each one of them." Quentin seemed about to say something more, but instead stood abruptly. "Got an early start tomorrow. Good night, Hannah." As autumn deepened toward winter, the family settled into routines. Hannah taught the children daily, using books she'd brought from Boston and improvising lessons about the natural world around them. Quentin began joining them occasionally in the evenings, listening as Hannah read aloud from classic literature or taught the older children mathematics. The fever that had threatened the community eventually subsided, but the incident had brought Quentin and Hannah closer, united in their concern for the children's welfare. Hannah noticed Quentin lingering at meals, offering to help with dishes, finding reasons to be in the house when before he'd avoided it. One crisp November morning, Hannah was hanging laundry when she heard Eliza approach. "Need help, Aunt Hannah?" the girl asked, reaching for a wet sheet. The title still surprised Hannah. Though legally their stepmother, she'd never insisted the children call her mother, respecting their memory of their own parents. "Thank you, Eliza," she said, smiling at the tall girl who reminded her so much of Quentin in her serious demeanor. They worked in companionable silence until Eliza spoke again. "Uncle Quentin's different since you came." Hannah glanced at her. "Different how?" "Happier. He smiles sometimes." Eliza pinned a shirt to the line. "And he talks about you when you're not around." Hannah felt her cheeks warm. "Does he?" Eliza nodded. "Yesterday, when you were teaching the little ones to write their letters, he watched from the door for the longest time. After, he told Matthew that we were lucky to have you." She paused. "I think he's falling in love with you." Hannah's hands stilled on the damp cloth. "Eliza, your uncle and I have an arrangement." "I know," the girl interrupted. "You married him to help us. But that doesn't mean things can't change." She glanced toward the barn where Quentin was working. "Before you came, I heard him tell Reverend Parker he'd lost hope. That no woman would want a man with 9 children who weren't even his own." Hannah watched as Quentin emerged from the barn, lifting his face to the sun for a moment, powerful and solitary against the landscape. Something stirred in her that she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge. That night, a storm rolled in, fierce and sudden as they often were in the territory. The wind howled around the house, and rain lashed against the windows. The younger children were frightened, and Hannah gathered them in the main room, telling stories to distract them from the thunder. Quentin came in, drenched from securing the animals, and stopped short at the sight of them all. Hannah with little Grace in her lap, Thomas and Rebecca pressed against her sides. The others clustered around listening as she described the snow-covered streets of Boston at Christmas. "And then," she was saying, "all the carolers would gather around a great tree in the common, holding candles and singing the most beautiful hymns." "What's a carol?" Daniel asked. "It's a Christmas song," Hannah explained. "Would you like me to teach you one?" The children nodded eagerly, and Hannah began to sing Silent Night in a clear, sweet voice. One by one, the children joined in as they picked up the simple melody. Quentin stood transfixed, water dripping from his clothes, as Hannah taught his family something he could never have given them himself. When she looked up and saw him, she smiled and motioned him to join them. To everyone's surprise, especially his own, he did. Later, after the children were finally asleep and the storm had quieted to a gentle rain, Quentin found Hannah in the kitchen, warming milk on the stove. "I thought you might need this," she said, pouring the milk into a cup and adding a spoonful of honey. "You were soaked to the bone earlier." "Thank you." He accepted the cup, their fingers brushing briefly. "You were good with them tonight, during the storm." Hannah shrugged lightly. "Children need comfort during frightening times. It's more than that." Quentin's voice was low. "You love them." It wasn't a question, but Hannah answered anyway. "Yes, I do. Very much. When you first came here," he said slowly, "I thought you were just looking for a place to land, that you'd leave once something better came along." Hannah met his gaze steadily. "Is that what you still think?" Quentin set down his cup. "No. I think you're exactly where you're meant to be." He hesitated, then added quietly, "With us." Something in his tone made Hannah's heart beat faster. "I'm glad you feel that way. There's something I need to tell you," he said, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "The school board sent word. They're opening the school after New Year's. They want to know if you're still interested in teaching." Hannah stared at him. The position she'd originally come for was finally available. But now. "I see," she said carefully. "And how do you feel about that?" Quentin's jaw tightened. "It's your decision. You came here to teach." "I came here to start a new life," she corrected gently. "And I have." Hope flickered in his eyes. "So you'll stay?" "Here, I mean, not take the teaching job." Hannah smiled. "This is my home now, Quentin. These children are my family." She paused. "And you are my husband." Something changed in Quentin's expression, a softening, a vulnerability she'd never seen before. "Hannah, when Margaret died and left me with these kids, I thought my life was over. I didn't know how to be what they needed." He took a step toward her. "But then you came, and everything changed." Hannah's breath caught as he reached for her hand. "I know our marriage isn't what most people dream of," he continued, his voice rough. "But I find myself wondering if it could be more than just an arrangement." Hannah looked up at him, seeing uncertainty in his eyes. "What are you saying, Quentin?" He took a deep breath. I'm saying that I think I'm falling in love with my wife. The words hung in the air between them, honest and fragile. Hannah felt tears spring to her eyes as she realized she'd been hoping to hear those words for weeks now. I think, she said softly, that your wife might be falling in love with you too. Quentin's hand trembled slightly as he touched her cheek. I never thought I'd feel this way again. Or at all, really. Hannah leaned into his touch. Neither did I. When he kissed her, it was gentle at first, tentative, as though he feared she might disappear. But as she responded, his arms encircled her, drawing her against him with a certainty that made her feel truly at home for the first time in her life. The winter months brought new challenges as the family adjusted to the shifting relationship between Quentin and Hannah. What had begun as an arrangement of convenience was blossoming into something neither had expected. Quentin moved his things into Margaret's old room, now Hannah's, making their marriage real in every sense. The children observed this change with various reactions. Eliza seemed pleased, often sharing knowing glances with Hannah when Quentin's attention lingered. Matthew was cautiously optimistic, while the younger children simply accepted that their Aunt Hannah and Uncle Quentin were a true family now. On Christmas morning, Hannah woke before dawn to prepare a special breakfast. She'd been saving ingredients for weeks, a precious orange for each child, cinnamon for the bread, a small amount of maple sugar Reverend Parker had given them. She wanted this first Christmas as a family to be memorable. As she worked quietly in the kitchen, strong arms slipped around her waist, and Quentin's voice rumbled against her ear. "Merry Christmas, wife." Hannah turned in his embrace, smiling up at him. "Merry Christmas, husband. The children will be up soon," he warned, but made no move to release her. "Let them see," Hannah replied softly. "They should know their parents love each other." Quentin's eyes darkened at her words. "Their parents," he repeated. "You truly think of yourself as their mother now?" "I do," Hannah said simply. "If they'll have me as such." Quentin kissed her then, a kiss full of gratitude and tenderness that left her breathless. True to prediction, the children tumbled into the kitchen minutes later, excited about Christmas morning. Hannah had managed to make or mend a gift for each child: a doll for Rebecca, carved wooden animals Quentin had made for the younger boys, books for the older children, a new dress for Eliza sewn from fabric ordered from the mercantile. As the children exclaimed over their presents, Quentin pulled Hannah aside, pressing a small package into her hands. "It isn't much," he said apologetically. Hannah unwrapped it carefully to find a simple silver locket. Opening it, she found a tiny sketch of the ranch on one side. "The other side is for a family portrait," Quentin explained. "Come spring, I thought we might go to town and have one made. All of us together." Tears welled in Hannah's eyes. "It's perfect," she whispered, reaching up to kiss him. "I have something for you too," she said, retrieving a package from its hiding place. Inside was a leather-bound journal, the cover tooled with his initials. "For your thoughts," Hannah explained. "You watch the sunset sometimes with such a faraway look. I thought you might like to write down what you're thinking." Quentin ran his fingers over the fine leather. "No one's given me something like this before," he said quietly. "Thank you." Their moment was interrupted by shouts from outside. Quentin went to the window, frowning. "It's Mason from the next ranch over. Something's wrong." He hurried outside, Hannah following. Frank Mason sat on a lathered horse, his expression grim. "Quentin, there's trouble," he called. "Rogers and his boys are running cattle off small ranches, claiming the land is theirs by some deed they've suddenly produced. They hit the Wilsons yesterday, ran them off at gunpoint. Word is they're heading this way next." Hannah felt Quentin stiffen beside her. "Rogers has wanted this land for years," he muttered. "Never thought he'd resort to forgery and violence." "The sheriff?" Hannah asked. Mason snorted. Conveniently out of town. Rogers paid him off, most likely. Quentin nodded grimly. How many men does Rogers have? 6 or 7. Armed. Hannah's heart raced as she realized what this meant. Quentin glanced at her, his expression hardening as he made a decision. Hannah, take the children to the root cellar. Stay there until I come for you. Quentin, please, he said quietly. I need to know you're safe. Hannah nodded reluctantly, gathering the confused children and ushering them toward the root cellar behind the house. Eliza helped with the younger ones, her face pale but determined. What's happening? Matthew demanded as they huddled in the dimly lit space. Hannah tried to keep her voice calm. Some men are coming who might want to cause trouble. Your uncle is going to speak with them. Is he in danger? Eliza asked bluntly. Hannah couldn't bring herself to lie. I don't know, sweetheart, but your uncle is a strong, capable man. Hours seemed to pass as they waited in tense silence, the younger children eventually falling asleep despite their fear. Hannah strained to hear what might be happening outside, but the thick walls of the cellar blocked all sound. Finally, the door opened, and Quentin's silhouette appeared. It's safe now, he said, his voice weary. As the children scrambled out, Hannah noticed Quentin was favoring his left arm, a dark stain spreading on his sleeve. You're hurt, she gasped, reaching for him. It's nothing, just a graze. He glanced at the children. Eliza, get the little ones inside. Matthew, fetch my medical kit from the barn. Once the children were occupied, Hannah insisted on examining his wound. The bullet had indeed only grazed him, but the cut was deep and needed cleaning. What happened? She asked, gently washing away the blood. Quentin winced as she worked. Rogers and his men showed up, waving some forged deed, demanding we leave. When I refused, one of them got trigger-happy. His expression darkened. Mason and I managed to drive them off, but they'll be back. With more men, Hannah guessed, wrapping a clean bandage around his arm. Quentin nodded grimly. Rogers won't give up easily. He wants this land, and he doesn't care how he gets it. Hannah secured the bandage, her mind racing. Then we need help. The other small ranchers, the townspeople, surely they won't stand for this. Most are too afraid of Rogers. He's got money, influence. Then we'll have to be smarter than he is, Hannah said firmly. This is our home, and I won't let anyone take it from our children. Quentin looked at her with surprise and something like admiration. Our children, he repeated softly. Yes, Hannah said, her chin lifting. Ours. And I'll fight for them as fiercely as you will. The next few days were tense as Quentin and Hannah prepared for Roger's return. They sent the oldest children to stay with Reverend Parker in town, keeping only the youngest 4 at the ranch. Quentin taught Hannah to shoot his spare rifle, something she'd never imagined doing in her Boston life, and they took turns keeping watch. On the 3rd night, Hannah was awakened by Quentin shaking her gently. They're coming, he whispered. At least 10 riders, moving slowly to avoid being heard. Hannah's heart pounded as she slipped from bed and quickly dressed. The children, still asleep. I've got Mason and 3 others from neighboring ranches hiding in the barn and behind the house. We need to get you and the children to safety. Hannah gripped his arm. No, I'm staying with you. Hannah, listen to me, she interrupted fiercely. I didn't come all this way, find this family, fall in love with you, just to run at the first sign of danger. Those men want to take our home. I won't let them. Quentin stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right. But the children, I'll hide them in the root cellar again. Eliza can keep them quiet. They moved quickly, settling the drowsy children with blankets and reassurances. Hannah kissed each one, lingering with little Grace, who clung to her neck. Mama come back? The toddler whispered, using the title she'd recently begun calling Hannah. Hannah's throat tightened. Yes, sweetheart. Mama will come back. Be good for Eliza. Outside, she joined Quentin behind a barricade they'd created from hay bales and furniture on the porch. The rifle felt heavy and awkward in her hands, but she gripped it with determination. They're approaching from the east, Quentin murmured. When I give the signal, Mason and his men will come out from hiding. That should surprise them. Hannah nodded, her mouth dry with fear. Quentin, she whispered, I love you. He turned to her, his face softening for just a moment. I love you too, Hannah Caldwell. More than I ever thought possible. He touched her cheek briefly. When this is over, I'm going to court you properly, the way you deserve. Before Hannah could respond, the sound of approaching horses grew louder. Quentin's expression hardened as he turned back toward the darkness. Remember, he said quietly, aim low. Better to hit a horse than miss a man entirely. Roger's men came into view, dark silhouettes against the starlit landscape. Hannah counted 11 riders, all armed. Rogers himself led them, his voice carrying in the night air. Caldwell, come out and face me like a man. This land is mine by rights. Quentin stood, keeping behind the barricade. That deed's as fake as your courage, Rogers. Coming in the night with guns against a family. Rogers laughed harshly. A family? That mail-order bride and a bunch of orphans? You call that a family? Hannah felt anger surge through her, drowning out her fear. She stood beside Quentin, rifle ready. We are a family, she called clearly, and this is our home. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Rogers snarled, Get them! Gunfire erupted as the riders charged. Hannah fired her rifle, the recoil slamming into her shoulder. She had no idea if she hit anyone, but she reloaded as Quentin had taught her and fired again. From the sides of the house, Mason and the other ranchers emerged, adding their fire to the defense. The attackers, surprised by the additional resistance, faltered. 2 horses went down, their riders scrambling for cover. Another man cried out, clutching his arm. But Rogers pressed forward, his gun aimed directly at Quentin. Hannah saw it happening as if in slow motion. Without thinking, she threw herself against Quentin, knocking him sideways just as Rogers fired. Pain exploded in her side as they tumbled behind the barricade. Hannah! Quentin's face loomed above her, his expression horrified. I'm all right, she gasped, though fire seemed to spread from her ribs throughout her body. Keep fighting. The battle continued around them, but Quentin was focused only on Hannah, pressing his bandana against the wound in her side. Hold on, he murmured. Just hold on. A new sound cut through the gunfire, horses approaching fast from the direction of town. Shouts rang out and suddenly the shooting stopped. This is Sheriff Taylor. Drop your weapons. All of you. Hannah's vision blurred as she heard multiple voices, footsteps approaching, Quentin's desperate explanation. Someone knelt beside her, Reverend Parker. She realized dimly. The children sent me for help, the Reverend explained. Eliza was worried. She snuck out and rode to town. Smart girl, Hannah whispered, then winced as pain lanced through her. Don't talk, Quentin urged, his face pale with fear. Save your strength. The next hours passed in a haze of pain and movement. Hannah was vaguely aware of being lifted onto a wagon, Quentin's hand gripping hers the entire journey to town. The doctor's concerned face appeared above her. Voices murmured about a bullet, blood loss, surgery. The children, she managed to say before darkness claimed her. When Hannah opened her eyes again, sunlight was streaming through unfamiliar curtains. She was in a bed, bandages wrapped tightly around her midsection, and Quentin was asleep in a chair beside her, his head resting on the edge of the mattress, his hand still holding hers. She moved slightly, and pain flared in her side. The small sound she made was enough to wake Quentin, whose head jerked up, his eyes finding hers instantly. "Hannah," he breathed, relief washing over his features. "Thank God." "The children?" she asked immediately, her voice rough. "Safe. All safe." He helped her sip water from a cup. "Rogers and his men have been arrested. Turns out the sheriff wasn't bought off after all, just slow to respond. And when he heard what happened—" "How long have I been here?" 3 days, Quentin said, his face betraying how difficult those days had been. The doctor wasn't sure. He stopped, unable to continue. Hannah squeezed his hand weakly. "I'm still here." Quentin's composure broke then. He buried his face against their joined hands, his shoulders shaking. "I thought I was going to lose you," he said, his voice muffled. "Just when I finally found you." Hannah stroked his hair with her free hand. "It would take more than a bullet to separate me from my family." He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed but determined. "When you're well enough to travel, I want to take you away from here, just for a while. To San Francisco, maybe. Somewhere beautiful, where I can court you properly, like I should have from the beginning." Hannah smiled, touched by his earnestness. "What about the children? Eliza's old enough to mind them for a week, with help from neighbors." He kissed her hand. "Hannah, you almost died protecting our home, our family. Let me show you how much that means to me. How much you mean to me." For months later, as spring blossomed across the territory, Hannah stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching as Quentin taught Matthew and Daniel to rope a calf. Her side still ached occasionally where the bullet had torn through her, but the doctor assured her she would heal completely in time. The ranch was transforming under their care. With Rogers and his men in prison, the small ranchers had banded together, forming an association to protect their interests. Quentin had been elected its president, a position of respect he never would have imagined for himself. Hannah had declined the teaching position in town, choosing instead to focus on her family, though she did volunteer at the school 1 day a week. The children were thriving. Eliza was courting a young man from town. Matthew was showing real promise as a rancher, and even little Grace was blossoming, now confidently calling Hannah Mama and running to her with scraped knees and treasured findings. As promised, Quentin had taken Hannah to San Francisco once she was strong enough to travel. For 7 days, he had courted her properly with flowers, dinners at fine restaurants, walks along the bay, and a new silver wedding band to replace the simple one they'd used in their hasty ceremony. They had returned home renewed, their bond deeper than either could have imagined possible when they first met. "Penny for your thoughts," came Quentin's voice as he joined her on the porch, dusty from his work but smiling. Hannah leaned into him as his arm circled her waist. "I was just thinking how different my life is from what I imagined when I left Boston." "Better or worse?" he asked, a hint of insecurity still in his voice after all they'd been through. Hannah turned to face him, placing her hands on his chest. "Infinitely better. I came west looking for purpose and found a family." "Found you?" Quentin's eyes softened as he drew her closer. "I lost hope, you know. After Margaret died, with 9 children looking to me for everything, I didn't think any woman would want this life. Then I'll raise you all together." Hannah quoted her own words from months ago, smiling at the memory. "You're doing more than raising us," Quentin said softly. "You're teaching us to live again, to love." As the sun began to set over the desert landscape, Quentin gathered the children for their nightly ritual of family dinner, followed by lessons or stories around the fireplace. Looking at their faces in the golden evening light, Hannah felt a surge of gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought her here, to this unlikely family that had become her own. Later that night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their room, Quentin traced the scar on Hannah's side, his touch reverent. "I never want to come that close to losing you again," he murmured. Hannah caught his hand, bringing it to rest over her heart. "You won't lose me, Quentin. I'm exactly where I belong." He kissed her then, a kiss that spoke of devotion and passion and promises kept. Hannah responded with equal fervor, marveling at how this marriage of convenience had transformed into the deepest love she'd ever known. Spring turned to summer, and the ranch prospered under their joint care. Hannah discovered she was expecting their first child together, news that brought tears to Quentin's eyes and excited chatter from the 9 children who couldn't wait to welcome a new sibling. On a warm evening in August, as the family gathered on the porch after supper, Matthew asked, "Can you tell us how you and Uncle Quentin met again? It's my favorite story." Hannah exchanged a smile with her husband. "Well, it all began when a schoolteacher from Boston found herself without a school, and a cowboy with 9 kids had lost all hope," Quentin continued, taking her hand. As the desert stars appeared overhead, Hannah leaned against Quentin's shoulder, surrounded by their children, the future stretching before them like the vast western sky full of possibilities, challenges, and most importantly, love that had grown from the most unexpected beginning. "Then I'll raise you all together," she had promised all those months ago, not knowing how those words would shape her destiny. Now, with Quentin's arm around her and their family gathered close, Hannah knew it had been not just a promise, but the beginning of the greatest adventure of her life, one she would never trade for all the comforts of Boston or the security of a conventional path. In the wild territory of Arizona, a mail-order bride and a desperate rancher had found something neither expected. A love story written not in flowery sentiments or grand gestures, but in daily acts of courage, sacrifice, and commitment, a love as enduring as the land itself.